Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I am Susan Guthrie, your host, and today I am joined by one of my Chicago friends. I'm joined by Kimberly Cook. Hi, Kimberly. It's so nice to see you.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited about this today.
I am too. We have talked about this for year and a half, at least since we first met, right?
Yes, we have. And you know what? Time flies. I feel like we all missed a whole year. When I think about like last year, I often want to say 2019, but in fact, it is 2021. So yes, it has been, we've been chatting about this, but you know what? It's today's time. So it's great.
Yeah, well, and it's perfect. And this is a topic I've wanted to cover for a while now. It's near and dear to my heart, and I know it is to yours as well. I do want to give listeners a little background on you because I think it's really relevant so that they'll understand the information that you're bringing and the experience that you bring to the table. So I'm going to start with, you and I met actually when you were speaking at an event with our friend Laura Wasser, and the two of you were talking about, I think it was prenups and millennial marriages and a younger generation. But you were speaking because you were one of the leading partners in one of the top matrimonial law firms in Chicago, if not the country at that time. And right. I charged right up and introduced myself.
And I'm so glad you did. Yes, no, we were talking about prenups and postnups, but also, those things that you should look out for when you're dating or really getting serious about someone. It was a great, fun conversation. And, when I think back to that, I'm like, gosh, pre-COVID, we were all like in a very fun space in a room and, very close together. And, what a difference a year and a half makes, right? But yes, very much at the time I was a partner with a firm doing divorce litigation, which also involved prenups and postnups, which I'm still doing, but now I've transitioned into a different role as a mediator full-time and have moved from the firm into my own firm. And so it's been a great transition, but definitely a transition.
Yeah. Well, that's to go from, for those people out there who are listening, the culture and structure of a large law firm it's very hierarchical in some ways. I went through it myself, that transition. So, you have the attorneys and they do certain jobs, and then there are staff members and everybody has their role, and there are a lot of people who do things. And then suddenly you go off and you open your own office, and who's doing everything?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, me. So yes. And I will tell you, that has been the huge learning curve, right? It's not the actual substantive work. I have a lot of people say, oh, how's the transition going? And I'm thinking the work is fine because this is my sweet spot. This is my zone. However, it's everything else. It's all the admin. So I'm the, finance department. I am the marketing department.
Yes.
I send out the bills. And so, yes, that has been just really getting in a groove of being a business owner. Yes, definitely a transition. And with each day, I feel like I'm, getting better. But I am one of those people, I know enough to know what I don't. So I had to hire like an accountant, and I've got a tax person so that, those things are taken care of. But otherwise, the receptionist is me or my voicemail if I'm in the middle of a session, right? Which is very different, very different.
Yeah, but also very freeing in some ways, right? And speaking of freeing, you took the opportunity when you left your firm, and this is the same journey I took. So I love it. It warms my heart. You shifted from litigation to a mediation practice. You took that opportunity, and that's pretty much your entire practice now, mediation?
It is. So I practiced litigation for about 15 years, and, enjoyed litigating. It was something that I enjoyed the adrenaline. I enjoyed, advocating on behalf of clients. And it was really one of those things that I look back and I think, it was such a great ride. And I learned a lot about myself and certainly about families and people as a divorce attorney litigator. But at some point where I kind of started to transition, really, I'd say started about 2 or 3 years ago, where most of my kind of practice was really moving towards attorney assisted mediation or kind of direct negotiation and settlement. And I think for me, it felt more of I'm growing in a different way. I think the practice area is growing in a different way. And this is such a great alternative for families that I needed to really kind of sink my teeth into and explore and delve into, and in a way that I think has allowed me to now fully transition as a mediator, dealing with, of course, financial and parenting matters, which has been great. And I think my experience as a litigator makes me a better mediator because I can do a lot of kind of the reality testing and, from the perspective of, hey, I've heard this in court. Let's work through this. Let's think this through. How does that logistically work? And so having that experience, I think, has really helped propel me and prepare me to really move into full-time mediation practice, which has been exciting.
Yeah. And it's a different world, but in so many
Yes.
ways it feels more rewarding. I know when you can fully immerse yourself into that mediation practice.
Absolutely. It's interesting because the first month, at the end of the month, I was saying to a girlfriend, this may be the first time in, my entire practice where I truly heard both sides of everybody's story, right? Because, as an advocate and as a litigator, I immerse myself in my client's position, in their story, and what's going on so that I can build, our strategy and represent them. And that isn't to say that at a hearing or in pleadings or filings that you don't get a glimpse of what the other person is kind of arguing. That's a very different feel than, really sitting in the neutral space and hearing someone's perspective as to why they want to keep the house or why this parenting schedule works better for them, and being able to kind of dig into, what's really going on, what's driving this. And so it's certainly been rewarding for me to kind of walk away and think about, wow, now I get it. Now I understand, how can we help kind of bridge this gap between the two of them? So yes, definitely a very different feel. It's difficult, make no mistake, but a different rewarding feeling, definitely.
Yeah, I remember when I first was making that transition and I said to a colleague that I wanted to do mediation because it was going to be the kinder, gentler way to get divorced, right? So you're laughing. I had no experience of mediation at that moment in time when I said that, but not that it's knockdown, drag out, but
Right.
these are difficult issues.
Yes.
And that's actually one of the reasons why we wanted to do this episode and we're going to be talking today about some of Kim's top do's and don'ts
Yes.
for mediation. But before we go there, I did also want to ask one other question, because you and I, when we talked about your transition and you were going to be opening your own firm, you commented that as a Black woman, you felt it was important that you open a mediation business and that this was going to be something that was significant. So I would love to hear more of that, or have you tell more of that reasoning or that thought process to my listeners.
Sure. I have always been one who felt that representation matters. And when you think about that in the context of the legal system, right, and it's representation. So representation by, an attorney or an advocate who's speaking on your behalf. It's so important to have different perspective, different voices, and really truly a different understanding. And though that comes from diversity, right? And so I spent years as, either the only Black female attorney at a large divorce firm. And it's not just certainly in Chicago. I have colleagues around the country where, someone will email and say, do you know someone who is Asian or African American or Hispanic? And I'm scrambling and I'm thinking, I shouldn't be scrambling like this. And the same is true when you look at the dispute resolution world. And for me, when I would refer clients to mediators, I would often have a client come back and say, I'm just not as comfortable. I feel like there's something that's missing. Not that this person doesn't have the education or the experience, but the reality of it is when we're dealing with intimate issues, you on some level want to connect with someone without saying something. You want to feel like, okay, they get us. It's the same reason many women say, I really only feel comfortable going to a female OBGYN.
Right.
Or, I prefer to have, maybe a therapist who, has children if I'm dealing with parenting matters. It's not that someone else can't do it. There's a sense and a comfort level. And so for me, as a woman of color, specifically African American, I found that there really was a void and that our voices weren't being heard, and that people weren't, especially in the Black community, weren't utilizing mediation and alternative dispute resolution as an option because it didn't feel like it was inclusive for us. And so here I come in charging, saying, nope, we're here. And, and this is important. So, thank you for bringing voice to that. It's certainly, though, I think a conversation, it's a larger conversation, both in the family law realm, but also in dispute resolution realm, where we really have to make great strides when we talk about like diversity and inclusion, because certainly our clients are the ones who benefit in the long run.
Yeah,
It's really important.
Bravo to you. And I just have to tell you, as a member of leadership for the ABA's dispute resolution section, this is such a huge topic that we are trying to tackle, because you are 100% correct. Minorities, if that's the correct even term for it, but there are just people of color, people from who look different, are not included in the rosters, are not included in dispute resolution, in the world. It's mostly older white men, women like me, like us. I mean, it's just, it's not an inclusive world. It needs to be an inclusive world for all those reasons that you said. So I just applaud you and thank you for putting voice to it, because it's very important that we talk about it.
Well, no, thank you. And I would also say that I think with family law in particular, we are just now, in the last, maybe 10, 15 years, kind of getting on the boat where it's a part of the overall dispute resolution community. Certainly, when you think about large unions, or when you think about contract disputes, when you think about school unions, they always go to mediation or arbitration, and they have for years. Family law is now, I think, finally coming around the corner with mediation and collaborative and arbitration in some cases, which is fantastic, because as you and I both know, it really allows families to get in the driver's seat, control the outcome, and, in my experience, really limit their return to court in future years, right? So, having these knockdown, drag out 2-year litigated battles, yes, people feel like, oh, well, the judge made the decision. Okay, great. And then you turn around and you're back in court because, something.
Nobody likes it.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody likes it.
No, exactly.
I mean, that is definitely one of the big benefits of a mediated agreement that people don't realize, but that they are much more durable. They last. And that is because you make the decisions, you and your spouse. You may not love them all. In fact, we might say you probably won't love them all.
Right.
But you picked them. You chose them.
Them. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think it certainly takes um a lot of work, right? To say, okay, I'm willing to move here, but it also requires a level of self-awareness and self-reflection. So when you have a mediator who's saying, what are you willing to give? If this area is so important, where are you willing to bend? Where are you? And to have someone ask you that and point blank say, well, where can you move? Or what are you open to considering? I think it takes someone a moment to really say, oh, you know what, you're right, I can't have it all. No one can have it all in any realm. And so having that ability to say, I can accept this for that, and vice versa, in the long run, chances are you're more likely to stick to that agreement because you negotiated that in that way, which I think is fantastic. It's hard, but it's fantastic.
Well, and it is hard and it is fantastic. So that's why I love this topic for today, these do's and don'ts for a
Yes.
successful mediation, because mediation, people sort of just think it's going to happen, right? And that it's right. It's just like some magic poof or something.
Yes.
And it's not. There's work involved. And these
Yes.
do's and don'ts to a large degree revolve around that work. But so let's dive in.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with a do or a don't?
I would say let's start with don't, because I think that always gets people's attention. So we'll go with the don't.
Okay. So don't number one.
Don't assume you have to litigate, right? Explore mediation. And I think that's so huge because it's an option, it's a viable option, right? And knowing that you have this option is, I think, the key to figuring out the best path for your family. So don't assume that you're going to litigate or that you have to litigate. Explore mediation as an option for your family, whether it's financial or parenting matters.
That's such a great point, because so many people have that knee-jerk response to hearing,
Yes.
I want a divorce or I'm getting a divorce, is to run out and hire a litigation attorney. But the other maybe don't to add to it, it strikes me as I was just thinking about it, is even if you're in litigation, don't assume you can't transition over to mediation.
Oh,
That happens as
absolutely.
well, right?
All the time. All the time. That's so right. It is, I think, the benefit of knowing, again, it's an option. I've had so many people who they've started out in litigation and have decided, ooh, this isn't for us, or the pace and the process isn't going as what they expected. They transition to mediation and it works. On the flip side, I've had people who have started in the mediation process and we resolve, say, 4 out of the 5, and then they can't get over one hurdle or one hump, and they use litigation to finalize that. So you can certainly use them both as needed. And so keeping your options open, I think, is certainly very beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, that's the beauty of mediation, really, right? Because it's 100% by choice. It
Yes.
means you can choose it at any time.
At any time, and it's confidential. And I say to participants all the time, what we do here, it stays here, right? This is
It's
truly
like
the
Vegas.
Vegas, right? Which is awesome, because then you can kind of lay bare and get really creative and we can brainstorm, but without fear that next week you're going to have to defend why you agreed to, 5 overnights, but now today you're saying 2. It's, if this didn't work in this process, all bets are off and you're going to litigation, and vice versa. The positions that you took in litigation are not positions here. This is not about positions. This is about problem solving. And so having the ability to use the mediation process to your benefit and in a way that will resolve issues, even if things started in litigation, I think it's great.
Yeah, I encourage everyone out there, no matter what process you're using, if it's not mediation, consider mediation if you need to keep moving it forward.
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so. I would say to that, though, when you're considering mediation, I would move to the do. right? Which is, do you find the right mediator for you? I think it's really important to do your research, interview. The great thing right now is everybody is doing Zoom, right? And
Yeah.
online. And so, the chances of you being able to reach out to a mediator in your area and say, I've got a couple of questions. Can we do a consultation via Zoom? I'm sure people are really open and really moving in that space, but you're going to be addressing intimate issues. So it's so important to have a good rapport and a good feel, but then also understand their process. Some mediators want to book all day sessions, where other mediators will say, listen, we can only do blocks of 2, 3, or 4 hours. Other mediators are more facilitative, and that's their process versus, say, evaluative. And so understanding process and understanding, how am I going to work and feel in this with this individual makes all the difference. So certainly take the time to find the right mediator for your fit and for your issues, but also keep in mind, not every mediator is an attorney. You do have mediators who are mental health professionals. You have mediators who are former judges. So exploring and understanding their background as well can, I think, really shape your decision in working with a mediator.
It's such a good point too about the fact that mediators come from different backgrounds, because I was just doing a course training mediators, and most of the mediators in the course were attorneys, but we had people from other professions. And one of the things that I was really suggesting they start considering is co-mediation. And I don't
Yes.
think people know it's available, but if you have significant parenting issues or issues with your children, or if you have a very complicated financial structure or picture in your divorce, it could be really helpful to have an attorney mediator who co-mediates with a professional mediator from one of those other backgrounds.
Yes. Yes, very, very true. I think, understanding the issues and the complexity of the issues can certainly lend itself to co-mediators, especially when you're dealing with a sensitivity, whether it's, specialized parenting matters, having a mental health professional or someone with that background to really kind of delve deep, which is going to be very different than, say, mediators who may have like a CPA or some sort of financial background. But again, knowing the options that are available to you and knowing that mediation allows for just, the use of a variety of options and alternatives for you, which is exciting and to me fun at the same time.
Yeah, I love co-mediating. I think it's one of my favorite things to do. And I love that really one of mediation's hallmarks is what you were just talking about. It really can be crafted to suit what your family needs as you transition through the process.
Yes, yes, very much so. There's this idea, I think, and it comes from litigation, that everybody kind of follows a mold and it has to follow the same path. And mediation is very different from that, right? It is uniquely tailored to your family. So maybe we start with parenting issues in one family, maybe we do financial, or maybe, somewhere in between, but every family has different issues and, unique approaches. And so the great thing about mediation is that it's not cookie cutter approach, because the outcome really is based on how you drive the outcome. But the process too is really kind of dictated by the participants, and the mediator is really there to kind of help facilitate that. And so I think that certainly is the benefit. But with that, I think, the don't assume that your spouse won't mediate goes along with that, because I think there are a lot of people who immediately think about oh, I served with the divorce papers, or we're talking about divorce, so let's go lawyer up and we're immediately going to court. The reality of it is, maybe consider saying, I've heard about mediation, or someone told me about mediation, or maybe we should look into mediation. And that's whether or not you have a lawyer. You certainly, not all mediations require an attorney. You're going to want to certainly check with the mediator you're working with, or where you live, but you can certainly explore the opportunity before you kind of head off into the, oh, we've got to litigate. So I think, don't assume that your spouse will not agree to mediate without first asking. The other thing with that is, maybe your spouse is interested in mediating for a whole host of reasons. Maybe they're interested in saving money. Maybe they're interested in getting things done sooner rather than later. Maybe they are someone who's non-confrontational and feel better about being able to dialogue and communicate and have a conversation in a setting that is not, positional. So certainly communicate, ask about it before assuming that, we're going to, haul off and go down the litigation route at the very beginning, because not all divorces have to start that way in that process.
Yeah, I'm so glad you talked about this, because I have heard this from people over and over again. I love the idea of mediation, but I know my spouse won't do it. And
Yeah.
when I say, did you ever ask? Have you talked to them about it? It's usually no.
Right.
Or it's, well, I did, but they immediately said no, so I just dropped it. Or they'd already hired an attorney, so I just didn't bring it up. And one of the things I think is really important for people to know is, whatever your reasons are for going
Right.
to mediation, they may be very different from what might incentivize your spouse to go. But
That's right.
there's so many benefits to mediation. Something is bound to strike
Yes.
your spouse as a good idea, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Absolutely. The other thing that I want to really kind of make sure that people really understand and give voice to, and I say all the time, mediation is not just for couples who can already communicate well or already get along, or
Kumbaya. Yeah.
that is not, and I think a lot of people go into the process or don't really explore the process because their thought is, we don't communicate, we don't get along, everything is acrimonious. It is the process for that. Even high conflict, and specifically high conflict cases, benefit from mediation, because you have a trained professional who is helping to facilitate the conversation and communicate in ways that allow for a dialogue to meet the needs and interests of everyone. So, it's not just, oh, we already have agreed to, 5 different things, and we just want to make sure that we didn't miss anything. Not everybody who comes to mediation is in that space. And that makes me think, Susan, a minute ago when you said about starting out as a mediator, and the thought of, oh, this is going to be on some level, kind of easier than litigation. I would say you're in the belly of the beast, right? You're right in the middle of the conflict. And so being able to navigate that and help people through that certainly takes a different skill set. But no, it is by no means all the, let's sit around and we're all, exchanging niceties. In some cases, there are, but I would say in most cases, it's really helping, individuals who don't communicate well through the process in that way. However, keep in mind, the mediator is not your judge, right? So don't expect the mediator to be a judge or to take your side. Mediator is a neutral. And I think it's really, really important to keep that in mind. They are a neutral, and they have no skin in the game. I've often find myself, reminding people along the way, I'm asking questions because I'm trying to get information, not because I'm taking a side, or not because, I'm giving any validation to one point or another, but I think it would be helpful to get more information and to better understand so that we can work through this. But the mediator truly is the mediator. and a neutral, but different than a judge being a neutral, right? A judge is a neutral, but a judge is also the decision maker. A mediator is here to help you facilitate an agreement, but they're not making the decision, whereas a judge is. So keeping in mind that, don't expect the mediator to be the decision maker for you. We're neutrals, and we're Switzerland, waving that white flag, like, hey.
But it's so true, because it's easier almost, right, to let somebody else make the decisions until you get a decision you don't like, and then you're going to wish you didn't let someone else do it. But I love that, because we are Switzerland. We are there to help you so that you make the agreements. I love that.
That's right. That's right.
One of the things this makes me think of too is because people have sort of, you talked about it earlier, just sort of, they think that there's a process to mediation that's just going to happen like magic. And when we were talking about some of these do's and don'ts, you and I at the top of our list had the same one, I think.
Yes.
So what's your big do?
The big do, I feel like we should have like a drum roll.
Right? Yeah.
It's prepare. I can't say it enough. And I think that a lot of time the thought is, I've never been divorced, or I've never so I don't know what to do. I don't know. So you, mediator, tell me, so my response to that is, you do though, right? You know how you feel about a schedule. You know what you would like to see the holidays look like on a going forward. You know, on some level, your income and your expenses, or how things really worked in your marriage or in your relationship. And so at a minimum, when you're going to mediation, have those things kind of written down and organized in a way that you can work through them. So whether that's, okay, I don't know, my kid's school schedule just yet, but here's what I do know. For the last 3 years, they went to this school, and we had 2 weeks of winter break, and summer was June through August. At least have what I'm going to call kind of the basic day-to-day information available. And then what would you like to see? What are your positions, or what are your thoughts? What are your proposals, right? Like that's, what are you wanting to offer up or to discuss? Because the mediator is there again to facilitate the conversation, but is not there to say, well, I recommend this schedule for you based on, their experience with other families. So absolutely prepare. Preparing may also look like working with your lawyer or working with your accountant to at least get an understanding of, all right, we prepared our tax returns. Here's my income for the last couple of years, so that I have a working knowledge of, what our finances look like. Preparation may also include, we're thinking about listing the house, but here's the timing. We don't, maybe know how much we're going to list it for, but we both know we're not staying here. So those type of things, but absolutely prepare, because you're going to get the most, I think, bang for your buck. Because if you spend the first session really kind of having the mediator say, well, okay, how many kids do you have? What is their spring? All of those things that you could have, really come to the table by saying, here's just generally an outline of who we are and what we have going. Certainly, I think will be helpful for you. So number one thing to do is to prepare for mediation and throughout mediation. So by extension, you have session one. And if during session one, there were questions about how much your income or your bonus for this year, or what's the health insurance numbers, do the homework. You have to do the homework. This is your life. These are your decisions. So prepare for mediation, prepare during mediation, and I would even say after mediation, because you want to make sure that you review any memorandum of understanding. Let's make sure that everything that we agreed to is covered. and then transitioning it to turning them into the final documents that can be entered. So prepare, prepare, prepare. That's huge. That's the big one. You have to do it.
It really is. And I love that you mentioned know what you want, because so many people, and I'm going to add a don't in here. When your mediator looks to you and wants to know what it is you want about some issue, don't say, I just want what's fair.
Yes.
Because,
yes.
right. You hear it all the time.
All the time. You know what my response is? My response to that. So what is fair?
Thank you. Right?
Like what is fair? Because what's fair for you may not be fair for someone else. So what is fair? And if what you're saying is, 50-50, then say that. Or if what you're saying is, I actually want 100% of my retirement account, then say that. But I agree with you, don't say, well, what is fair? Or I want what, other people have had. What's the standard? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what the standard is. There isn't a standard, right? There are guidelines depending on your state, which you can reference, but everything can be worked through and figured out in mediation, which goes to the mediation is about problem solving and not position. So if you're coming to mediation saying, well, I just want what the law says, and that's the only thing I'm going to accept, then my response may be, well, this may not be the process for you, because we are trying to find solutions in ways that allow us to work through them that may be different than what a judge would do.
Right. And by the way, we don't know what a judge is going to do. We've spent God knows how many hours in courtrooms listening to what judges do. And I can tell you right now, I don't know what a judge is going to do the next time I walk into a courtroom.
Oh, listen, you can be in the same courtroom and hear the exact or very similar argument and get one result in the morning and get another result in the afternoon. And so I would say to you, not only we don't know, your lawyer doesn't know either. They're doing their very best to argue on your behalf, and it might just depend. And so, yes, I would say that the benefit of mediation certainly is, the outcome, right? You're we're not rolling the dice here with is the judge in a bad mood? Did the judge get in, a fight with his or her spouse this morning? Did a new ruling come down that's going to flip everything on its head? So yes, no, there's no guarantees in litigation that people need to really, really understand that. But
yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. It made me think of it because we hear it because the add-on don't say I want what's fair is don't say I want what I'm entitled to, because that's just as bad, right? The two of them kind of go together in my mind. Who knows what you're entitled to?
That's right. That's right. But so then I would add the do to that, right? So don't say what's fair. Don't say what I'm entitled to. Do come in with an open mind. Come in open to suggestions, open to listening, open to being creative and really digging deep and trying to problem solve. And maybe what that looks like is just throwing things out there for brainstorming, and we get things down and we talk things through, because you never know. The one thing that you thought, oh, they'll never accept that, might be the very thing they accept. And so come in with an open mind and be willing to move through the process in a way that is not kind of constrained by well, this is what the court says, or this is what has to be done. So certainly coming in open mind, I think that's a big do for me.
That's it's actually critical, because not to sound like we have magic wands or anything, but that's where the magic happens in a mediation room. It's when people move to being creative, to having an open mind, to trying to come up with some way where both you and your spouse can get as much of what is important to you each.
That's right.
That's where the magic happens.
That's right. And to that, you've said the word magic. I would say It's not a magic bullet. It
Yeah.
takes work and real work. We're working through difficult and intimate issues. And, there will be times when it's tough. And so, coming in with the ability to say, all right, I recognize that this is going to be a process. I recognize that maybe we have, between the two of us, tried to figure this out. And I know that this is going to be a sensitive topic. However, we're going to really try to push through, give the process the ability to work. So having that sense of, I recognize it's not a magic bullet. It's going to take more than 10 minutes to resolve all of these issues. It might take us 10 minutes to even get everybody, on the same page as to what an issue is.
Or more than that, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So knowing that it is truly a process, but being open to the process and willing to work through it will certainly be beneficial, I think.
Well, it absolutely will be beneficial, as will this episode. I have to tell you, I'm so excited about this episode because I think the information that you just gave is going to be so helpful for people. This is the real stuff. And I'll just tell you, Kim obviously is a skilled and fantastic mediator. I train mediators, and everything that I'm hearing is like just to my ears. I'm like, oh man, this girl knows what she's doing. This is amazing.
Listen, I am so appreciative of you saying that, because you are like the master trainer, and you've like written the code for how this works and this process. And so to hear that from you, certainly means a lot. I will say, working with families to get them from point A to point B through a difficult time has always been what I would say my calling and my mission. And moving in a direction of mediation, so alternative dispute resolution, really was a natural progression. Litigation for me worked when it worked. And I look fondly back on my time as a litigator, but I have now moved in this direction. And for me, I think by extension, it's a benefit to those who I'm able to serve in this way. So thank you very much for saying that. It's a good time to be a mediator. I'll say that.
Oh, it's a wonderful time. And it's wonderful for the world that mediation is really starting to come into its own in the family space. It's good for families. It's good for people. You say something that I've often said about that litigation time in my life. It was fun at times as a practitioner.
Yes.
As you said, the adrenaline, the prep, the going in there and thinking on your feet and using your skills. But when you turned and saw some of the havoc that could be wrought on families and the damage, that wasn't so fun.
Not at all. Not at all. And, when I look back over the years, when I started practicing, and I hate to be one of those people all those years ago when I started practicing, most divorces at the time, maybe, an outlier case, maybe a year and a half. And now that's a fast-tracked case.
Yeah.
And so, just the overall, courts are inundated, they're overwhelmed. And that's even before COVID. And now we've got, court dockets that were shut down for months at a time. And so that means that families were not getting the relief that they needed in order to move forward, and the backlog. And so when I look at how mediation has allowed me to help families, even during COVID, move forward and get things done in a way that gave them the ability to say, okay, we have walked through this and we can now move forward, has just been, it's breathed life back into me. But yes, no, I mean, anyone who knows me in Chicago knows that, being in the courtroom, I enjoyed. And there are days I will say that I'm thinking, maybe I would pick up a litigation case. And I'm like, no, I'm just not. It's not for me anymore, because I have found a way to really give voice to participants in a way that gives me that same adrenaline feel, but gives them the lasting benefit that, litigation just hasn't been able to, and isn't able to provide.
Yeah, well,
So, yes.
I'm going to leave the mediation conversation right on that mic drop moment. But I don't want to let us finish without talking about Grown Girl Divorce, Kim's
Yay.
podcast. So
Yes. Yes.
you started it, you finished season 1, which I think is still in the archive, but
It is.
season 2 is coming out soon.
Season 2 is coming out soon, and I'm excited about it. Grown Girl Divorce is certainly a labor of love for me. And we are going to get geared up to get season 2 coming out shortly. So yes, please, please, please listen to the archived. We are on all of the major networks. And so check us out and look for season 2. Grown Girl Divorce is conversations between girlfriends talking about anything dealing with before, during, and after divorce in a way that we hope to be fun, but gives real information to get people through a really tough time.
It's a great podcast. I will link to it in the show notes so that people can find it. And I'll be sure to, when it's coming out, I'll make sure to get it out on my Instagram and everything so people know. And it's wonderful. So Kim, these are going to be do's and don'ts that I really hope are going to help people get started or get through their journey and get through their mediation process, which, as we've talked about, is going to be so helpful to their family and give them something they can carry forward. If people want to speak to you some more, get some more information from you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Great. So yes, check me out. I'm at Dovetail Conflict Resolution. My website is dovetailcr.com. You can find me on Instagram at Dovetail Resolution, as well as on Facebook. I'm also on LinkedIn under Kimberly Johnson Cook. So certainly, if I can be a resource to anyone through the mediation process, then, I'm happy to do that in any way that I can. So thank you very much, Susan, for having me on. I really appreciate it. And for those who I can help, look me up. I'm here.
Yeah, she is. And she works on Zoom. So you can call her from anywhere. So Kim, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad that we finally got to do this, and I can't wait. This is going to be a special 2-part episode. It's going to come out on Monday and Thursday. So if you're listening to part 1, stay tuned for Thursday, and part 2 will be coming out then. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.